was powerful. I don't know, maybe it's because I got some laryngitis and I feel like I got my Pentecostal preacher voice on. Maybe that's why I wanted to keep going. You know, there are times where you hop up here and you have a message and you preach a message and you wonder, God, are you speaking, or is this just me coming up with something? Or that's not the case today. I feel like God has anointed me for this very moment, for someone in the house. And I wish I could say you feel that all the time. I really wish I could, but complete transparency, authenticity, you don't. But today, I feel like God has given me an appointment today to preach the gospel to you, and I'm so thankful for that. We're going to continue this series, John chapter 9. If you know, you know. If you know, you know. You know, when I was younger, and people often talk about their spouse, and they talk about how they met. Well, I just met him, and I just knew. And I thought, that is the silliest thing I've ever heard in my life. What do you mean you just knew? You met him in a grocery store. You met him in the, whatever. Maybe you don't want to share to people where you met because it's a little embarrassing. I don't know. I'm not trying to read your mail. I said, I don't know. Something just happened when I saw him or when I saw her. And I remember thinking as a child, I thought, man, these old people, these 30-year-olds, they're so silly. What do you mean if you just know? Well, when I was 16 years old, I walked into a church service, and I was late coming in for the first song, and there was this girl. I thought it was a woman at the time, but it was a girl. And she was singing a solo far before I would ever thought about playing keyboard or anything. And she sang beautifully. It was like nothing I had ever heard before. And she looked like nothing I had ever seen before. I thought, wow, this girl is awesome. And I remember asking my mom, I was like, hey, I met this girl. I didn't meet her. I was scared to go say hey to her. I saw her on the stage, and she said, well, I have a coworker that has a niece that sings. And I said, oh, no, this girl's far too old for me. She's way too old for me. No, you need to check. I think I can find a picture for you. And it was her. And for the first time in my life, if you know, you just know. Luckily, she wasn't as old as I thought she was. She was younger than me, so I set out on a mission to make her fall for me. Now, a few less pounds, a little more hair. She was beautiful then. She's more beautiful now than she was then. And I'm so thankful that she ended up falling for me. Now, that's been however long, 20 years ago, which makes me feel old again. But I remember thinking that if you know, you know. And I think that's so true for our walk with God sometimes, isn't it? We want to explain to people, if you know, you just know. I don't know how that works all the time. Maybe it doesn't work out because I believe apologetics, being able to understand, being able to dictate your faith and all that is so important. But sometimes you just know. Like, I just feel something inside of me. This is a great idea. I know not the way he leads me, but well do I know my guide. How many times have you felt that in your life? I know I felt that many times. Lord, where are you taking me? Where are you sending me? What is going on right now? And I can't answer. But what I can say is, but I know him, and I just know. I don't know how I know, but I just know that I know. Now for us, I think when we give our life to Jesus and we want to begin to preach Jesus, be able to show Jesus to the world, it's intimidating, isn't it? It's like, I don't know what to do with that. I don't know if you haven't thought about that. Maybe ask yourself, how do I reach people for Jesus? Like, Like, not how Central does it, but how do I reach people for Jesus? And now the temptation is to automatically go to all the things that you can't do. Let's put that and let's put it over here, okay? Let's focus on how do you, and you may say, well, gosh, I mean, I come to church. I thought that was the way. And if you're in the room and you haven't thought about it, fear not. I'm going to help you tonight. And maybe you just got saved. Like today's your first service, or you're online and you're thinking, I'm just exploring who this Jesus person is. This message is for you also. I know that I know. Throughout John chapter 9, we see these statements of what someone knows and how it changes things. So first off, in the first piece of it, I know that I am sent. I know that I am sent. John chapter 9, 1 through 7. Now, what you have to understand is back in those days, when someone was blind, they spent their entire life just begging. That's all they could do. So understand that you can't look at this with modern science to think all the things, all the convenience, all the braille and all the different things that we have to be able to help some things. Back then, you just kind of begged for whatever you could get. So we meet this guy in chapter 9, and Jesus was walking by, and the disciples ask a question. And I think that question still is true for us today. So as Jesus was walking along, he saw a man who had been blind from birth. Rabbi, his disciples asked him, why was this man born blind? Was it because of his own sins or his parents' sins? That was the very first question, is how did this happen? Do you think that it was because of this, because of this? In fact, these poor disciples, they're human as they can be, aren't they? They just walk by, instead of saying, what can we do about it? Jesus, why do you think this is going on? Why do you think this is happening? And I must confess, I'll be at the front of the line. There are times where I'm walking through life. Instead of asking myself how or what can I do, it's like, I wonder why they're in that situation. I wonder why this is happening to them. I wonder what did they do to deserve to be poor? Like, what mistakes did they make in life? I know that's being transparent and being authentic, but Jesus shows something. He displays something for his disciples here. Now, we all know this common thing. Now, Romans 5:2, when Adam sinned, sin entered the world. Adam's sin brought death, so death spread to everyone, for everyone sinned. It wasn't because of his parents' sin. It wasn't because of his sin. It wasn't because of what he had done. He was born blind. Now, the question conveys an idea that I think is still true for us today. And it takes a little bit of humility to swallow and to think of this. But it is easier to discuss sin than to minister to a concrete need. I mean, it just is. It's easier to look at someone from a distance and be able to say, they have some problems. They have some things going on in their life. And I would implore us today to maybe look at our life and look at the people around us and say, what is the concrete need? Because that's exactly what Jesus is teaching in this moment. You're asking why. Let me show you why. Verse 3. It was not because of his sins or his parents' sins, Jesus answered. This happened so the power of God could be seen in him. We must quickly carry out. He was sent out of the tasks assigned by us by the one who sent us. The night is coming and then no one can work. But while I am here in the world, I am the light of the world. He says, you have to understand, you can't look at this situation. You have to look at me and watch me move. Watch me do the miraculous. Watch me do these amazing things. He says, I am the light of the world. And then he does something very unique, extremely unique. He does this. He spits on the ground, made mud with saliva, and spread the mud over the blind man's eyes. I know some of you are thinking that's pretty gross. But if you're blind, you're probably willing to try anything. If you've been born blind, you're willing to give anything a shot. So he told him, go wash yourself in the pool of Siloam. Siloam means sent, which he's already said he is sent to do these things. So the man went and washed and came back seeing. Now just think about this. Again, begging. Entire life, begging. And then, go put some mud on your face. Go wash it off. Now, you can see. He had never had the opportunity to look at his wife's eyes, to be able to see how beautiful she was, to walk into the room, to know that you know. Never had the opportunity to see what a tree looks like or see how beautiful the mountains are. Just beg. The beginning of the days, the middle of the days, the end of the days, begging. And now, he can see. Now, what's miraculous about this whole thing is now the Pharisees around want to know one thing. How were you healed? I mean, really, for all that he knows, he could not see. And then, I'm not going to spit because that's disgusting for me today. There's mud on the ground. And now we put it together, and he put it over my eyes. And then when I washed it off, for the first time, I could see a little bit of light. I didn't know what it was. What was dark was now showing something. And then I opened my eyes for the first time. And they're wanting to know how. If there's one thing that we are sure of, if you have not been able to see, if you had never seen before, and then you did, the last thing that you are concerned about is how. And that is the question he gets throughout John chapter 9. John verse 10 says this. They ask, who healed you? What happened? Then it keeps going. 15, the Pharisees asked the man all about it. So he told them, he put the mud over my eyes, and when I washed it away, I could see. Verse 19, I know I'm jumping all around. They asked them, because this is consistent. They keep asking. They were fixated on how. They asked them, is this your son? Talking to his parents now. Was he born blind? Was he really born blind, or is he lying to us? Because we just can't believe this. You mean to tell me he spit in dirt and then made it mud, put it over his face, and he could see now? Are you kidding me? You must be lying to me. There's no way this is true. How could this even be possible? If so, how can he see? There's no way he was really blind. Verse 26 says this, but what did he do? They ask, how did he heal you? We want to know how he did it. Because this doesn't make sense. How? Isn't it amazing how people get so fixated on the how and not fixated on the who? Throughout chapter 9, it was over. How did he do this? How did he do this? There's no way that he was blind. They try to rationalize things in their mind because it is so easy to focus on the mechanics of a miracle instead of trusting of the maker of the miracle. Let's see how, if I just turn just right, maybe it'll happen. But the one person that this did not matter to was the person that could now see. You mean to tell me, if he couldn't see, and now he could, that he cares about the mechanics of the miracle? I don't know about you, but anybody in the house that needs a miracle today, and it happens, something you were born with from the very beginning, I'm telling you one thing. If I woke up tomorrow with a full head of hair, I ain't spending no time asking how. I'm going to get me some gel, and I'm going to make it look good. Because clearly that would be a miracle. Unless Shanna glues a toupee on my head while I'm asleep, it's a miracle. Even that I'd probably be okay with for a little while until it started looking ratty. Because what is true for us today is the mechanics of the miracle just do not matter. It's a miracle. He couldn't see. And now he can. Who cares how it happened? How did this happen? How did this happen? Will you tell me your son? This is a story that's consistent with Jesus. Jesus talks about being born again. It's so silly for us, but if you've been most people who are here on midweek tonight have been in church for, this is not your first service, but there may be a couple people, so we love you too if this is your first service, but most of us have been in church a couple of times. So when you hear the word born again, it's like, oh yeah, of course we know about being born again. But back then, I mean, this very thing, Nicodemus, what do you mean? How can an old man go back into his mother's womb and be born again? How? How? How are these things possible? How? He talks about giving his life up for us. And this is the response. The people began arguing with each other. How can this man give us his flesh to eat? How? Because the reality is there's many things in faith that you can't explain. How? And if you try to, intellectually, you're going to fall and you're going to falter at some point. And what I believe really happens often is because we can't always explain the how. We, in fact, give up preaching Jesus because we're afraid when someone asks us a question that we can't explain how. So what I want to do is I want to release you really quickly. If you get into a situation, somebody asks a question that you don't know the answer to, this is a big answer, okay? I don't know. I know what I know. Because there are things that someone may ask those words, how, and you just can't answer it. Because this how question can become paralyzing even. Paralyzing for us believers, paralyzing for people who are coming to the faith. They just want to know how, like we want to know everything. But we know the older we get that there's so many things in life that we're not going to know the answer to that just don't make sense. It's exactly what Jesus is preaching to these disciples. It's not because of this. He was born blind and now he can see. Now this is the message to the disciples, and for us today, these same questions, this same how, riddles our life, doesn't it? Anytime you want to preach Jesus to someone, the how question is coming. How can you trust in a God that you can't see? It's coming. How can you love a God that supports? How can you love a God that doesn't support? The answer to their real question is not how. The answer to their real question is who. That's what it always falls back to. It's who. And we see now this man has been transformed. His whole life has changed. In the same way, we don't have to explain the how I have been born again. I can explain the who. Galatians 2:20, my old self has been crucified with Christ. It is no longer I who live, but Christ lives in me. So I live in this earthly body by trusting in the Son of God who loved me and gave himself for me. And now I know that I am sent. As Jesus says to the disciples, we are sent to do tasks in the same way we are sent to do tasks. Now think about yourself, the blind man. Now you can see. I know that I am healed. They want to know the how, yes? Someone who has been healed doesn't care about how. Now the question starts to change a little bit. They want to know a little bit more about who healed you. Now, what I think is very interesting, it's subtle. It's subtle if you don't pay attention. Can somebody get me some water, please? Can you get me some water? There's a change in John chapter 9 in the progression of what we see this man, the way that he sees Jesus. First, he says this: who healed me? A man called Jesus. John 9, 10 through 12. They ask, who healed you? What happened? He told them, the man they call Jesus made mud, spread it over my face, and told me, go to the pool of Siloam and wash yourself. So I went, I washed, and now I can see. Thank you so much. I am just sounding like a... Don't tell me what I sound like. I should have turned the picture up. Wouldn't that have been interesting? It wouldn't have been interesting. And now I can see. Verse 12. Where is he now, they asked. I don't know. Now they want to know more about this man called Jesus. So think about it. That's what he said first. The first time he was asked, who did this? A man called Jesus. We're seeing a progression to what has happened in his life. Now it changes. Now he says it's a prophet. In verse 17, then the Pharisees again questioned the man who had been blind and demanded, what's your opinion about this man who healed you? The man replied, I think that he must be a prophet. Now we've established a man called Jesus. Now, the more I just sit here and think about it, I was blind, and now I'm looking at you and talking to you. He must be a prophet. You see a progression of this healing. It does not stop there. Verse 24 through 34. I'm going to read through this very quickly. Now he is a man of God. So for the second time, they called in the man who had been blind and told him, God should get the glory for this because we know this man Jesus is a sinner. These Pharisees, I tell you what, I don't know about you. I just want to pop them sometimes. We know he's a sinner. Well, I don't know whether he's a sinner, the man replied, but I know this. I know what, if you know, you know. I was blind, and now I can see. That's what I know. I know that this stuff was on my face, and I go to a pool, and now I'm looking at you and talking to you. So I don't know what he is. But I was blind, and I can see now. But what did he do, they asked. How did he heal you? Look, the man exclaimed, I've already told you this. I told you once. Didn't you listen? Why do you want to hear it again? Do you want to become his disciples too? You want to learn how to do this? And then in typical Pharisaical fashion, they say this. Then they cursed him and said, you are his disciple, but we are disciples of Moses. We know what we believe in. We know that God spoke to Moses, but we don't know even where this man comes from. Well, that's very strange, the man replied. He healed my eyes, and yet you don't know where he comes from. We know that God doesn't listen to sinners, but he is ready to hear those who worship him and do his will. Ever since the world began, no one has been able to open the eyes of someone born blind. You see a change in his conversation, yes? He's going from somebody, now this is a man of God. If this man were not from God, he couldn't have done that. You were born a total sinner, they said. Are you trying to teach us? And then they threw him out of the synagogue. So his life has changed miraculously, very, very quickly. And instead of being greeted with, this is amazing, this is awesome, we're done with you. You think you can educate us about this man? I don't know what to tell you. I'm just telling you I couldn't see and now I can. If you know, you know. If you lived, what he's really saying is if you lived in my skin, you would know why I'm saying this. How effective is that as an evangelism tool? I don't know everything about Jesus. I can barely do the New Testament. The Old Testament makes me fall asleep at night. But if you were in my skin before he reached down and touched me, if you only knew, you would know. That's what he says to these Pharisees. Now what's amazing is the man, he gains his sight. He lost everything he knew. He was blind, he begged, but now he was in the synagogue. He didn't really know what it looked like, but he was there, and now he has to leave. So he has begun this progression of who Jesus is in his life. Do you notice how bold he was communicating to the Pharisees? What did he do before he was healed? Beg. Not a very bold position to beg. I don't know if anybody in the house has ever had to beg before. It's pretty hard to be bold while you beg. Because he was healed, because he was changed, he went from begging to boldness. The same is true for us in our lives. Before Jesus, we may have gone from begging for attention, begging for significance, begging for something more, begging for holiness, and didn't even know that's what we were begging for, to boldness. Because he was transformed. And now we see he knows what he knows. And what he knows is that he is Lord. The transformation in his life is miraculous. Everything is different now. Now, it's not enough to believe that he is a man called Jesus or a prophet or a man of God. It's just not enough. And for us today, we're in this place where a lot of people know about Jesus. A lot of people know what a Bible is. They have secular books about Jesus, which is the most amazing thing I've ever heard in my life. Let's write a book about Jesus and say he's everything but God, but he was really nice. It's not enough to know this. It's not enough to know about him. We have to know him. There's a complete difference between knowing about him and knowing him. Because what I believe today is there's a critical moment in everyone's life when they must define the person of Jesus. Either he is or he is not. There's a critical moment in time that we must declare who he is in our life. Because when you've been transformed, the way that you see Jesus is different. It changes. Because we know what the Word of God says. We know that this is everyone who believes that Jesus is Christ has become a child of God. Everyone who believes you were a child of your mom and dad, and now you're a child of God. When we hear his voice, it changes things. When we've been transformed, the fact that he had been healed, he didn't see God. He heard the voice, and he listened, he obeyed. John 10 says this, "My sheep listen to my voice. I know them, and they follow me." The blind man did not see and believe. He heard and believed. He heard and believed. John 9:3-5, now here we are. When Jesus heard what had happened, he had been kicked out of the synagogue. He was blind, he sees now, but we're going to kick him out. You've been expelled, excommunicated from the synagogue because you think you can educate us now just because, oh my gosh, just because you were blind, you can see, you think you're an educator? Yeah. Yeah, I'm an educator now. Do you believe in the Son of Man? Jesus asked him. The man answered, "Who is he, sir?" Because something's different. My life has changed. I want to believe. You have seen him. Do you think it's a coincidence that he says that? Not you have heard him. You have seen him. Jesus said, and he is now speaking to you. Yes, Lord, I believe, the man said, and he worshiped Jesus. The transformation in his life in one chapter for us in the Word goes from he's a beggar, he's defined as a beggar, to now this, I'm healed. This man called Jesus, he's a prophet, he's this man of God. He is the Son of God. This story is the same for each and every one of us who have given our life to Jesus, because we look at this and we see the miracle, we see the miraculous, and we're moved and we're thinking it's amazing. It's mud on his face and he can see. That's not even the greatest miracle in the chapter. The greatest miracle in the chapter is not the opening of his eyes, but the opening of his heart. That is what the greatest miracle. His eternity was going one way, and now because Jesus reached down and touched him, it has been changed. His entire life has been completely changed. And this is exactly what John is conveying to us in this chapter. He wrote his gospel to show that Jesus was the Son of God, and he used testimonies to do so. This is a testimony. Because without the end, it's just a miracle. But because of the confession, at the end, it's a testimony. John looks back and remember this. This is good. This is good. Did you remember seeing that? Did you remember that? That was awesome. This guy, we don't know what happens, but this guy's changed. There's power in a testimony. There's power. And being able to look at someone in the eyes and say, I was not a great person. But because of Jesus, I'm different. Because I'm changed. Because I love people different. And if you know, you just know. We see in the book of Revelation, this is talking about defeating Satan, by the way. Defeating Satan. And they had defeated him by the blood of the Lamb and by their testimony. The blood of the Lamb and their testimony. In our world, Satan is defeated because of the blood of the Lamb and our testimony. We say Satan has bound this. No, he has not. Because the grace and mercy of Jesus, we have a testimony. And that changes everything. And you may look at your life and you may say, well, yeah, if I was blind and I could see, I would have a testimony. Do not discount your testimony because it points people to Jesus. It's not about us. It's not about you. It's about Jesus. That's what a testimony is all about. I'm almost finished. Because before people will listen to the story of Jesus, they may need to hear your story. Believe it or not, for some people, church is a little scary. Before they can hear all this beautiful, wonderful prayer and worship and teaching, and teaching when Nathan and Pastor Carr are up here, not necessarily when I'm up here, but before they get to hear all this great stuff, maybe they need to hear your story. They need to hear how you have been changed, not how my pastor knows, how I know. Now, what if they reject me? Oh my goodness, what if they reject me? Here's some more good news. We're almost finished. Then Jesus told him, I entered the world to render judgment. Now he's talking to the Pharisees. To give sight to the blind and to show those who think they see that they are blind. Some Pharisees who were standing nearby heard him and asked, are you saying that we're blind? If you were blind, you wouldn't be guilty. But you remain guilty because you claim that you can see. These very people were rejecting Jesus right in front of his face. Are you going to be rejected some? Yeah, you can bet your bottom dollar you're going to get rejected every now and then. But we have the light of the world in us. And we may say, well, I have the light of the world. How can anybody reject the light of the world? Believe it or not, the same light that leads one person can blind another. And this is the best opportunity for us to release this. If someone rejects the light, it does not mean they are rejecting you. They are rejecting He that is in you. It's not personal. It's He that is in you. So I began with asking this one question. How do you point people to Jesus? Some of us think about it, some of us don't. What is the most effective way to reach people for Jesus? The most effective, this is big stuff. This is like high IQ stuff. The most effective way to reach the world for the gospel, I've got it right here on the TV screen. It's coming. Are you ready? Big deal. This is the number one way to reach people for the gospel. I mean, I know you got more than you bargained for. Can we come up and take up tithes and offerings again? Let's get some. The most effective way to reach people for Jesus is you. It's not rocket science. This world is dying, it's hurting, needs grace, mercy in their life they never experienced. They may need you to put your arm around them. They may need you to look them in the eyes. I know you got a lot of questions, and I don't have all the answers, but I can tell you what I know. And I know this man named Jesus came into my life at my lowest point, and He changed everything. And He can do the same thing for you. That, perhaps, is the most effective way to reach people for the gospel. Can we say amen? Let's stand up all over the house. Would you lift your hands all over the house tonight? Maybe for you, just pray for opportunity or boldness to preach Jesus to people. To be able to pray for people, to be able to meet a need for someone and say, it's not I, but Christ that is in me. Because the world needs Jesus. The world desperately needs Jesus. Father, thank you for the goodness that you've given me in my life, that you've given us. Thank you for the testimony that you've given us in the house. Father, we pray for boldness in our hearts, boldness like we have never had before, to be able to preach the gospel to our family, to our friends, to strangers, to people that we don't like, that we can still preach the goodness and mercy of Jesus. Give us opportunity, Jesus. Open our minds, open our ears, open our hearts to it, Jesus. In the mighty name of Jesus we pray. And everybody said, amen. Can we